Imagine, if you will, the moment when someone you trusted looked you in the eye and pretended to care, all while sharpening the knife they would later plunge into your back. Betrayal never begins with strangers. It begins with familiar smiles. It is often the ones who hold your hand that also hold the blade. And what's most devastating is not the betrayal itself, but the ease with which they walk away, as if your tears mean nothing, as if your pain is disposable, as if you were never human in their story, just a stepping stone in their selfish pursuit. There is a grief that doesn't speak, a sorrow born not from the loss of love, but from the death of trust. When you gave your loyalty, your time, your forgiveness, and they trampled over it without hesitation, you may have asked, why didn't they care? Why didn't they stop to think of the damage? Because guilt never visited their doorstep. Because conscience was silenced by pride. Because they believed they could escape accountability by simply forgetting what they did. But there is one who does not forget. There is one who counts every tear you shed, who sees every sleepless night, who knows the weight of your silence. And while they may have betrayed you without guilt, God is making them reap every tear. God does not require your revenge. He doesn't ask for you to become bitter, to harden your heart, or to match their cruelty. No, He simply asks you to stand still, to trust that while the pain was loud, His justice is louder. For the Lord declares, "Vengeance is mine, I will repay." You may not see it yet, but the scales are tipping. The same hands that wounded you will tremble. The same mouths that mocked you will taste regret. The same people who dismissed your cries will find themselves drowning in their own, not because you asked for it, but because divine justice requires it. Every act sown in wickedness must reap a harvest of truth. What they did may not haunt them today. Their life may seem joyful, their posts may show laughter, their steps may look confident, but you must understand this: guilt postponed is not guilt erased. God does not operate in our timeline, but His justice is never delayed. You see, when God begins to deal with those who wounded you, He does not use your language of revenge. He uses His language of teaching. He allows life to echo your pain back into their world in a way that speaks to them directly, not for your satisfaction, but for their awakening. Because a heart that hurts others without guilt is a heart that must be broken to be rebuilt. And yet, while they are being dealt with, you are being refined. While they reap every tear, you are being restored with every promise. That is the difference between those who break others and those who are broken. One reaps destruction, the other receives divine comfort. Your sorrow was not wasted. Your silence was not overlooked. Your heartbreak was not meaningless. It was sown into heaven's soil, and the Lord who saw it all is preparing a harvest that not only lifts you up, but makes it known that your purity was not weakness, it was power. So do not let their guiltlessness fool you. Do not let their coldness convince you that God has forgotten. For every tear they caused, there is a lesson awaiting them. And every tear you cried is now an ingredient in your elevation. Let's now step forward and explore 7 sacred reminders, signs that God is indeed making them reap what they sowed, and ensuring your soul heals as they fall into the pit they dug for you. Their peace is fading while yours begins to bloom. There is a quiet unraveling that begins when someone wrongs a soul that walked in truth. It doesn't show up as thunder or lightning at first. It doesn't arrive with sirens. Instead, it shows up in the stillness of the night, in their sleep that no longer settles, in their breath that feels heavier, in their thoughts that circle restlessly with no exit. While you wept quietly into your pillow, asking God why your peace was stolen, what you didn't see is that peace was never theirs to keep, because peace does not live in a heart that knowingly breaks another. It may linger for a moment, but it does not stay. It cannot abide where guilt should have been. You must understand something about spiritual laws. When you were wronged without reason, when they betrayed you, spoke lies, or acted with cruelty while you stayed silent in dignity, you triggered a higher court. You didn't even know it at the time, but your cries and questions reached heaven before you found the words to speak them aloud. And heaven did not ignore you. It began working not by destroying them, but by removing their peace. The peace they faked having on the outside now begins to decay on the inside. This unraveling doesn't always look dramatic. In fact, it's often invisible to others. They may still laugh in public, still dress up their lives with filters and performances, but deep down, the stillness that once gave them control begins to collapse. They can't enjoy the same distractions. Their pleasures lose taste. Their mind no longer feels like home, and slowly the weight of what they've done starts pressing on their chest like invisible stone. It's not always immediate. Sometimes their peace fades slowly, almost silently, while yours begins to bloom gradually like morning light after a long storm. At first, you may not even notice. You're still recovering from the wounds, still doubting your worth, still questioning God. But then, almost mysteriously, you begin to feel something you haven't felt in a long time. Calm. Your chest isn't as heavy. Your tears slow down. A stillness comes that isn't silence. It's comfort. That is the beginning of God returning to you what was stolen. That's the moment your peace begins to bloom. And when peace starts to return to you, it begins to lead them. That's the exchange. They lose what they thought they could keep through manipulation. You gain what you thought was lost forever through grace. God orchestrates this in a way that doesn't even require your involvement. You don't have to curse them, chase them, or expose them. All you have to do is keep walking. Their betrayal has a spiritual cost, and they are paying for it with the slow erosion of their inner life. The beautiful irony is this: while they betrayed you without guilt, they now begin to carry the very unrest they tried to bury in you. And while they cannot explain the weight on their chest, you begin to breathe easier. That is how God works. He gives you back what the world stole, and He takes from them the very thing they abused: peace. In your silence, He is speaking. In your surrender, He is restoring. The same words they used to wound you now echo in their own life. Words are never just sounds, they are seeds. And every seed sown in malice, in betrayal, in deception, must grow. The problem for those who betray others without guilt is that they believe their words have no return. They think they can say what they want, manipulate with ease, twist truth into poison, and walk away untouched. But life is never neutral with speech. When someone wounds you with words, especially if your heart was pure and your intent was sincere, those very words become the instruments of their own undoing. Have you ever sat in silence, replaying the cruel things they said? Words that broke your spirit, that questioned your worth, that mocked your loyalty? Those words didn't die, they were planted, but not in your heart. They were planted in the soil of justice. And what they didn't realize is that those same words would echo back into their life, not by coincidence, but by the very phrases they used to strip your dignity will return in moments they least expect, from people they never imagined, and in ways they cannot defend. It might begin with someone speaking to them in the same condescending tone they once used with you, or a friend might betray them with the exact same excuse they once gave you. Or worse, their own voice may start to haunt them in their own thoughts. The cruelty they projected begins to replay in their own minds, now not as a weapon, but as a mirror. Suddenly they hear the words not as power, but as pain, and there is no place to run from an echo that lives inside your own conscience. You may wonder how God allows this, why He doesn't stop them immediately. But the truth is, God lets echoes grow slowly so that their full sound can be felt. He allows them to hear over time what they once threw carelessly into your spirit. Because for justice to be transformative, it must not only correct the wrong, it must educate the soul. And so God uses the same language they used against you to teach them what true pain feels like, not to destroy them, but to bring them to truth. Because repentance does not come from being caught, it comes from being convicted. Meanwhile, you begin to heal from those words. Slowly, God rewrites them. He replaces their accusations with affirmations. Where they said you were not enough, He whispers that you are chosen. Where they said you would never be anything without them, He begins opening doors you never thought possible. The more those words lose power over you, the more power they gain in tormenting the one who spoke them, not because you cursed them, but because justice has memory. And this is what brings peace to your soul, knowing that God is not passive with pain. He is just, He is precise, and He is protective over those who are wronged in silence. So while they betrayed you without guilt and spoke with cruelty as if you were nothing, life is now repeating those words to them with a new message. This is how it feels. They are surrounded by what they once made you feel, loneliness and emptiness. Loneliness is not simply the absence of people. It is the absence of connection, meaning, and peace. The kind of loneliness that lingers even when surrounded by a crowd. The kind you once felt because of their betrayal. You trusted them. You opened your world, your soul, your life to them, and when they betrayed you without remorse, it shattered your spirit in a way that made the world feel quiet, cold, and hollow. They turned your love into isolation, your loyalty into abandonment. But what they didn't know is that they were creating a world for themselves. A world they would eventually have to live in. At first, it may seem like nothing has changed in their life. They move forward, make new friends, laugh in public, act as though they've left you and your pain behind. But the spiritual realm doesn't work that way. When someone breaks a soul that was kind, sincere, and innocent, that act echoes beyond the moment, and slowly, without warning, their world begins to change. The people they once confided in begin to distance themselves. The very affection they took for granted becomes scarce. The warmth they once found in their surroundings starts to fade. It's not punishment, it's reflection. God allows their surroundings to reflect the emotional climate they forced upon you. They begin to experience the same coldness, silence, and sense of being forgotten that they thought you would never recover from. They feel misunderstood, isolated and disconnected, not because people are suddenly cruel, but because what they sowed emotionally into your life is now returning into theirs. This is not revenge. This is spiritual balance. God does not allow pain inflicted in innocence to pass through His hands unnoticed. Every tear you shed in that lonely place has been stored like precious seeds, and those seeds have now begun to grow into their life, not as flowers, but as thorns. The beauty of this divine process is that it requires no noise from you. You don't have to explain what you went through. You don't have to justify your heartbreak. Life becomes their teacher. Their own emotions become the evidence. And as they face sleepless nights, empty conversations, and hollow connections, they begin to realize, this is what I made them feel. But unlike you, who turn to God in your brokenness, they may not yet know where to run. And while their loneliness grows, something else begins to happen in your life. God starts filling your emptiness. Slowly you find your soul being restored in quiet places. A new friend appears. A comforting word is spoken at the right time. You find peace in your own company. You begin to recognize that their absence was not your punishment, it was your protection. And the emptiness they left behind becomes the space God uses to bless you. In contrast, they begin to face the same emotions they once caused, only now they have no one to blame, no one to lean on, no one to fill the silence. That is how divine justice works. It does not destroy, it reflects. And now, they are living in the emotional wilderness they built for someone else. God begins to disconnect their sources of joy and control. There is a moment in every betrayer's journey when they start to feel powerless, not because someone has taken anything from them, but because God has begun to take his hand off what once gave them joy, influence, and comfort. It's subtle at first. The places where they once felt most confident now feel unstable. The people they once easily manipulated no longer respond the same. The control they held over situations starts to unravel, and it's not because the world is turning against them, it's because heaven is intervening. When someone causes deep hurt without repentance, when they betray, lie, or manipulate and feel no guilt, their joy often comes from seeing how much power they have over others, whether it's emotional control, social influence, or just knowing they can leave destruction behind without facing consequences. This gives them a sense of satisfaction. But that sense of satisfaction is fragile because it's not rooted in truth or love. It's rooted in ego, and anything rooted in ego is vulnerable to collapse. So God begins to shake the very foundations they've built their comfort on. The friends who always sided with them begin to see through the mask. The job or opportunity they boasted about starts to crumble. The attention they thrived on begins to fade. Even their laughter starts to feel forced. It's not that someone is sabotaging them. It's that God is closing the tap. The spiritual fuel they used to feel invincible is now running dry, and they don't know why. This divine disconnection serves two purposes. First, it removes their ability to continue harming others. When someone's power is misused, God steps in to cut the lines. It's like stripping the wires of a dangerous machine before it causes more damage. Second, it creates space for reflection. Without the noise of distractions, without the applause of enablers, they are left alone with their conscience. And for someone who never felt guilt, that silence is loud, that stillness is terrifying. They may try to replace what they lost. They may seek new people, new opportunities, new addictions, anything to avoid facing the emptiness that has come upon them. But every time they chase joy outside of God's will, it slips through their fingers. Because what they once had wasn't real joy. It was stolen comfort. And stolen comfort always comes with a cost. That cost is now being collected. Meanwhile, as their sources of control and joy vanish, you begin to find yours in God. What they lost you gain, but with peace. You begin to enjoy real laughter. You attract people who see your worth. You find strength in your vulnerability and authority in your kindness. While their world grows smaller and darker, yours begins to expand and shine. The very power they use to control you has been reversed, not by force, but by divine justice. This is how God operates, not by shouting, but by shifting. He disconnects their fake joys and reattaches your soul to real joy. And now, every attempt they make to reclaim their lost control becomes a silent reminder that they are no longer in charge. God is. Your name returns to them in regret, not power. There comes a time when the very mention of your name no longer makes them feel superior. It makes them feel haunted. When they betrayed you, your name carried no weight in their conscience. They spoke it lightly, maybe even mockingly. They believed they had won. That walking away without guilt made them stronger. That using your goodness and discarding your presence gave them the upper hand. In their mind, you were forgettable, but time has a way of making the forgettable unforgettable, and what once brought them pride now brings them pain. In the beginning, they might have spoken of you as though they were the hero of the story. They twisted narratives, justified their betrayal, and pretended that letting you go was wisdom. But deep within their spirit, something else began to grow. A quiet discomfort. It's the discomfort that comes when the truth begins to push through the lies they told themselves. It's the soft sting that emerges when your name is brought up unexpectedly, in conversations, memories, or even in dreams, and they can no longer laugh it off. At first, the discomfort is small. They ignore it, they distract themselves. But over time, the truth becomes unavoidable. Your name becomes a mirror. And every time they hear it, they are forced to see the person they once were. The one who harmed you without reason, who left you without closure, who broke something beautiful without blinking. And now, instead of superiority, your name brings sorrow. Instead of pride, it brings guilt. Instead of power, it brings regret. This is not something you orchestrate. You don't need to remind them of your worth. You don't have to shout your name for justice. Life does that for you. In small, divine moments, your name returns to them through people they meet, situations that resemble your kindness, or relationships that lack what you once freely gave. And each time, it presses into their heart with a deeper weight, not out of cruelty, but out of awakening, because no one walks away from a sincere soul without carrying the memory, whether they admit it or not. While your name begins to echo with regret in their life, it begins to bloom in honor in yours. People start to speak of your strength, your kindness, your journey. God brings your name into new places, not for revenge, but for restoration. He lifts your reputation where they tried to bury it, and now, every time they hear your name, it carries a different power. Not the power to control, but the power to convict. It reminds them of what they threw away, of what they will never find again. This shift is holy. It is quiet, just, and inevitable. The one who once dismissed you will now remember you, not with mockery, but with a soul-deep sigh. And though they may never apologize aloud, their heart will feel the apology every time your name is spoken. 6. Life closes the doors they opened through deception. Deception is a doorway, one that opens easily for a time, but always leads to a dead end. When someone betrays you without guilt, when they lie to others to cover their tracks, when they climb using dishonesty and manipulation, they believe those doors will keep swinging open. They build relationships, gain opportunities, and make moves based on illusions. For a while, it seems to work. Their life moves forward. People believe the lies. Their circle grows. But there is one thing deception can never do. It can never build anything that lasts. God allows people to walk through doors they manipulated open, not because He endorses it, but because He is setting a stage. He allows them to feel comfortable in what they stole so that, in time, when the collapse comes, it is unmistakably tied to their own doing. The rise is allowed only to make the fall unmistakably divine. And when that moment comes, it doesn't happen with noise or drama. It happens in patterns. Relationships start to crumble. The people they impressed begin to walk away. The support they relied on dries up. One by one, the doors begin to shut. What's most painful for them is that they cannot understand why. They think they've mastered the game, but now the rules are changing because God has stepped in. What they opened through lies, He is now sealing shut with truth. Every path they carved through deceit is now becoming a trap. Every alliance they formed under falsehood is now turning cold. They are no longer being welcomed. They are being resisted, not by people, but by the invisible force of righteousness. You, on the other hand, were shut out. You were left behind when they chose the easier path. You were silenced while they spoke boldly. But now, life begins to do the opposite. The same truth that once hurt you now becomes your defense. The same honesty that made you feel weak now begins to open doors for you. And as their doors close, yours begin to open. With grace, favor, and divine timing. This isn't about competition, it's about correction. God doesn't shut their doors to hurt them, He shuts them to stop the damage. He blocks the paths paved in deception to protect others from being used the way you were. And while they wonder why everything is collapsing, you'll be walking through doors they thought you'd never reach. Not because you forced them open, but because your path was built in truth. Let them feel the weight of every lie. Let them face the silence behind every closed door, because what they opened through deception is now being sealed by justice. And you, the one they left behind, are now walking through the gates of divine favor they thought were never yours. God elevates you where they thought you'd be forgotten. There's something sacred about being underestimated. When people betray you and leave you behind, they rarely expect your story to continue, let alone flourish. They believe they've defined your ending. They speak of you as though you're finished. They walk away as if you were disposable. And in their arrogance, they believe they've won. But what they fail to understand is that God does His best work in hidden places. The people they thought were buried are the ones He plants. And while they celebrate your perceived downfall, heaven begins preparing your rise. You see, when someone betrays you without guilt, they not only hurt you, they bet against your future. They believe the wound they left will silence you, that you'll stay stuck in your pain, that you'll never recover. But what they forgot is that God does not write stories like man does. He takes what was broken and raises it. He uses what was thrown away and crowns it. And just when they think they've erased your name, He places it in rooms they cannot enter. This elevation doesn't happen all at once. It begins in private, in your healing, in your quiet obedience, in your choice to not retaliate. Every act of faith becomes a step on the staircase God is building for your comeback. While they move loudly in pride, you move silently in purpose. And slowly, without announcement, God begins to lift you. He opens opportunities. He brings the right people. He places a light on your life that no lie can overshadow. He places a light on your life that no lie can overshadow. What makes this rise so powerful is that it's not born from revenge. It's born from redemption. You didn't demand it. You didn't manipulate it. You simply remained faithful. And in doing so, you allowed God to do what only He can: elevate the rejected, honor the humiliated, vindicate the innocent. Now, the same people who dismissed you are being forced to watch your growth, not with applause, but with silence, because your rise speaks louder than their betrayal ever could. And here's the beautiful truth. God didn't elevate you to prove them wrong. He elevated you to prove Himself right, to show that goodness is not weakness, that loyalty still matters, that broken hearts can become blessed lives. You were never forgotten. You were being prepared. And now, everything they tried to bury is beginning to bloom. Your elevation is not just about success, it's about restoration. God is restoring everything they tried to take. Your name, your dignity, your confidence, your joy. He is making you a living reminder that no betrayal, no matter how cruel, has the power to stop a soul, protected by divine favor. Let this truth settle deeply in your heart. You were never forgotten. You were never discarded in the eyes of God. They may have betrayed you without guilt. They may have walked away as if your tears were meaningless, as if your worth was temporary. But God saw it all. He heard every unspoken cry. He counted every tear, not as drops of sorrow, but as seeds of justice. And now those seeds are bearing fruit. They are reaping what they sowed, not because you wished them harm, but because God is just. He is a protector of the innocent, a defender of the wounded, and a faithful witness to every betrayal done in silence. While they laughed without guilt, God was preparing their reckoning. While they stepped over your kindness, God was stepping into your future. This journey was never about revenge. It was about revelation, about showing you who truly stands with you when all others fall away. It was about letting you see what happens when you give your pain to heaven instead of handing it to hatred. And in doing so, you've become living proof that betrayal is never the end for those who walk with God. So hold your head high. You are not what they did to you. You are what God is doing through you. And the very tears they caused are now the waves they must face. Because in the kingdom of heaven, no pain is wasted, no loyalty goes unnoticed, and no betrayal escapes the reach of divine justice. You were hurt, but you are rising. They felt no guilt, but they are falling, and through it all, God remains faithful.